The Blue Moon Nightclub buzzed with energy on a warm Friday night in downtown Austin, Texas. The neon lights painted the entrance in soft blue and purple colors, while the deep bass of dance music pulsed through the walls. It was just another busy night at one of the city's most popular clubs, but for Staff Sergeant James Cooper, it was his first night out since returning from Afghanistan. Cooper sat alone at the corner of the bar, his fingers wrapped around a glass of cola. He didn't drink alcohol anymore, not since his second tour. At 32 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from years of military service. His short black hair was neatly trimmed, and even in casual clothes, a clean white shirt and dark jeans, his military bearing was obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. The bartender, Maria Rodriguez, noticed how he sat with his back to the wall, his eyes automatically scanning the room every few minutes. She had seen that look before, in other veterans who visited the club. In the 3 hours since Cooper had arrived, he had politely declined 2 drinks from interested women and simply watched the crowd, lost in his own thoughts. "Can I get you another cola?" Maria asked, approaching him with a friendly smile. She was in her mid-20s, with long dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail, and warm brown eyes that showed genuine concern for her regular customers. Cooper nodded, offering a small but genuine smile. "Thanks, Maria," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came naturally after years of leading men in combat. Even when speaking softly, there was a strength in his words that commanded attention. As Maria prepared his drink, Cooper's mind wandered back to his team in Afghanistan. It had been just 2 weeks since he left the dust and danger of Kandahar province. The transition back to civilian life was always the hardest part. Here, in this nightclub, the biggest danger should have been a drunk customer or a spilled drink. But 10 years of military service had trained him to always stay alert. He watched as young couples danced, groups of friends laughed over their drinks, and the regular drama of nightlife played out before him. It all seemed so normal, yet somehow distant. His squad members would have loved this place, especially Rodriguez, who was always talking about hitting the clubs once they got back home. Cooper made a mental note to send him a photo of the Blue Moon later. The night was moving along peacefully when Cooper's trained ears picked up the sound of motorcycles outside, their engines growling louder than the club's music. He didn't think much of it at first. Bikers often visited the clubs downtown. But something about the way the engines were revved suggested they weren't just regular riders out for a fun night. Through the club's front windows, Cooper could see 5 motorcycles pulling up, their chrome parts gleaming under the streetlights. The bikes were custom choppers, expensive and well-maintained, but decorated with patches and symbols that spoke of gang affiliation. The riders dismounted with the kind of swagger that usually meant trouble was following close behind. Maria noticed them too. Cooper saw her shoulders tense slightly as she wiped down the bar. "Those are the Steel Serpents," she said quietly, not looking directly at the entrance. "They caused trouble here before." Cooper took another sip of his cola, his face remaining neutral even as his mind shifted into a higher state of awareness. He didn't want trouble. He had seen enough violence to last a lifetime. But as the bikers pushed their way through the front door, their leather vests decorated with snake emblems and territorial patches, he could feel the atmosphere in the club change. The night, which had been peaceful until now, suddenly felt charged with tension. Cooper remained still, his posture relaxed but his senses sharp. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were telling him that this quiet evening at the Blue Moon nightclub was about to become anything but quiet. The 5 members of the Steel Serpents pushed their way through the crowd, creating a path of disruption as they moved toward the bar. Their leader, a massive man known as Crusher, stood at least 6'4", with arms covered in snake tattoos. His black leather vest was decorated with patches that told stories of territory fights and gang loyalty. Behind him, his crew followed like a pack of wolves. 2 skinny guys with mean eyes, a muscular man with a shaved head, and a tall biker with a long gray beard. The music kept playing, but people quickly moved away from the bar area. Cooper noticed how other customers grabbed their drinks and found safer spots, leaving a clear space around him. He didn't move, didn't even turn his head, but in the mirror behind the bar, he tracked every movement the bikers made. Well, what do we have here?" Crusher's voice boomed as he spotted Cooper's military-style haircut. "Looks like we got ourselves a Boy Scout." His crew laughed on cue, spreading out to surround the bar area where Cooper sat. Maria stepped forward, trying to keep things professional. "Welcome to Blue Moon. What can I get you, gentlemen?" Her voice was steady, but Cooper could see her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a glass. The biker with the gray beard leaned over the bar, getting too close to Maria. "5 beers, sweetheart, and make it quick. We're thirsty after teaching some lessons at our last stop." He winked at her, but there was nothing friendly about it. Cooper watched in the mirror as the skinny bikers positioned themselves on either side of him, trying to look casual but failing. He'd seen this tactic before, not in bars, but in combat zones. The enemy would try to surround a target before attacking. Some things were the same everywhere, whether in Afghanistan or a Texas nightclub. "Hey, soldier boy," one of the skinny bikers called out, his voice thick with mock respect. "Don't you know this is Serpent's territory? We don't like military types around here." Cooper took another sip of his cola, his movements deliberate and calm. You could smell the alcohol on their breath, mixed with leather and cigarette smoke. These weren't professional fighters. They were bullies used to intimidating civilians. In his mind, he was already mapping out the space, noting potential weapons, escape routes, and the positions of innocent bystanders. Crusher moved closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Cooper. "What's wrong, soldier? Cat got your tongue?" He reached out and shoved Cooper's shoulder, testing his reaction. The club's music seemed to fade into the background as Cooper finally turned to face them. His eyes, sharp and alert, met Crusher's gaze. "I'm here to have a quiet drink," he said, his voice low but clear. "I suggest you gentlemen do the same." The bikers burst out laughing, but there was anger in their eyes. They weren't used to people standing up to them, especially not alone. The muscular man with the shaved head cracked his knuckles, moving to block any escape route to Cooper's right. Maria returned with their beers, placing them carefully on the bar. As she did, the gray-bearded biker deliberately knocked one over, sending it crashing to the floor. "Oops," he smeared. "Looks like you'll have to clean that up, sweetheart." Cooper noticed how Maria's face flushed with humiliation. He saw her hands ball into fists at her sides, but she had no choice. She couldn't fight back against these men. Not alone. "You know what?" Crusher said, leaning in close to Cooper's face. "I don't like your attitudes, soldier boy. I think it's time we taught you how we handle disrespect in our territory." The tension in the air was electric. Other customers were already pulling out their phones, expecting violence. The club's bouncer, a big man himself, was watching nervously from the entrance, talking into his radio, probably calling for backup. Cooper remained seated, but his body was coiled like a spring. 10 years of combat experience had taught him that the moment before a fight was crucial. Everything depended on timing, position, and control. As Crusher's crew moved in closer, Cooper knew that this peaceful night at the Blue Moon was about to explode into chaos. Time seemed to slow down as Crusher reached for his beer. Cooper had seen this move before, the casual grab for a bottle that could quickly become a weapon. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that everyday objects were often the deadliest weapons. A bottle, a chair, even a pen could become lethal in the wrong hands. "Last chance," Cooper said quietly, his words barely audible over the music. "Walk away and enjoy your night somewhere else." His eyes never left Crusher's hands, tracking every small movement. The biker with the gray beard laughed and grabbed his own beer. "Listen to this guy. Thinks he's some kind of hero." He took a long drink, then deliberately poured the rest of his beer over Cooper's white shirt. The cold liquid soaked through the fabric, but Cooper didn't flinch. Maria stepped forward again, her voice stronger this time. "That's enough. I'm calling the police." She reached for her phone, but the muscular biker with the shaved head moved quickly, snatching it from her hand and tossing it across the bar. That was the moment something changed in Cooper's eyes. The calm look was replaced by something harder, something that had been forged in the heat of combat. He stood up slowly, his movements controlled and precise. Even soaked in beer, there was nothing funny about his appearance now. "Touch her again," Cooper said, his voice carrying the weight of command, "and we're going to have a serious problem." The words came out soft, but they cut through the noise like a knife. Crusher stepped closer, using his height to tower over Cooper. "Looks like we already have a problem, soldier boy. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time." He cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face. 5 against 1, Those aren't good odds, even for a military man. Cooper's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're right about one thing," he said. "Those aren't good odds." He paused, looking at each biker in turn. "For you." The skinny bikers moved in closer, their hands curling into fists. The club's music seemed to fade away as other customers backed up further, forming a circle around the impending fight. Someone had started recording with their phone, expecting another viral video of bar violence. "You know what I learned in Afghanistan?" Cooper asked, his voice still calm. "I learned that it's not about how many enemies you face, it's about how you face them." His stance shifted slightly. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle change in balance that only a trained fighter would notice. Crusher's face reddened with anger. No one talked to him this way, especially not in his territory. "Get him," he growled, reaching for Cooper's shirt. But Cooper wasn't there anymore. With a fluid movement that spoke of years of training, he had already stepped to the side. Crusher's grab caught nothing but air, throwing him off balance. "I also learned," Cooper continued, as if he were teaching a class, "that angry men make mistakes. Big mistakes." His hands were open, not clenched into fists, ready to react rather than attack. The gray-bearded biker swung first, a wild haymaker that whistled through empty air as Cooper leaned back just enough to let it pass. The movement was so subtle it looked like the biker had simply missed. Maria watched from behind the bar, her eyes wide. She had seen bar fights before, but this was different. Cooper moved like water, each motion precise and purposeful. There was no wasted energy, no dramatic gestures, just the calm efficiency of a trained professional. "Last warning," Cooper announced, his voice carrying across the now silent club. "Walk away, get on your bikes, find another bar." His eyes locked onto Crusher's. "Or we can do this the hard way, and trust me, you won't like the hard way." The air crackled with tension. 5 angry bikers, their pride wounded and their authority challenged, faced off against one soldier who showed no fear. In that moment, as Crusher's face twisted with rage and his muscles tense for action, everyone in the Blue Moon Nightclub knew they were about to witness something they'd never forget. Crusher made his decision. With a roar of rage, he launched himself at Cooper, throwing a massive right hook that would have knocked out most men. But Cooper wasn't most men. Years of close combat training took over, his body moving on pure instinct. Cooper stepped inside Crusher's punch, the big man's fist passing harmlessly over his left shoulder. In one smooth motion, Cooper grabbed Crusher's extended arm and used the biker's own momentum to throw him off balance. Crusher stumbled forward, crashing into one of his skinny friends. "Now," the gray-bearded biker shouted, and all hell broke loose. The muscular biker with the shaved head came in low, trying to tackle Cooper. At the same time, the other skinny biker swung a beer bottle at Cooper's head. Time seemed to slow down as Cooper's combat training kicked in. He sidestepped the tackle, letting the muscular biker run straight into the bar. In the same motion, he caught the skinny biker's bottle-wielding hand and twisted, forcing him to drop the makeshift weapon. Maria watched in amazement from behind the bar. Cooper moved like nothing she had ever seen before. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic kicks or punches like in the movies. Every movement was efficient, precise, and devastatingly effective. The skinny biker screamed as Cooper applied pressure to his wrist, forcing him to his knees. "Stay down," Cooper commanded, his voice still calm despite the chaos around him. The biker nodded frantically, and Cooper released him. Crusher had recovered by now, his face red with fury and embarrassment. He grabbed a bar stool and swung it like a club. Cooper ducked under the swing and stepped close, driving his elbow into Crusher's solar plexus. The big man's eyes went wide as the air left his lungs. "That's what we call a precision strike," Cooper said, catching the falling bar stool with his free hand and setting it gently aside. "Much more effective than wild swings." The gray-bearded biker pulled out a small knife, its blade glinting under the club lights. Several customers gasped, and Maria reached for her phone to call 911. But Cooper had seen far worse weapons in Afghanistan. "Really?" Cooper asked, shaking his head. "You want to escalate to weapons?" His voice carried a new edge of authority. "That's a federal offense now. Are you sure you want to go there?" The gray-bearded biker hesitated, and that was all Cooper needed. He closed the distance in 2 quick steps, grabbed the man's knife hand, and executed a perfect joint lock. The knife clattered to the floor as the biker dropped to his knees, howling in pain. The muscular biker had recovered from his collision with the bar and charged again. Cooper used the gray-bearded biker as a pivot point, spinning him into his charging friend. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs. Crusher, still gasping for air, tried one last desperate attack. He pulled back his massive fist for another punch, but his movements were slow and telegraphed. Cooper stepped past the punch and used a simple pressure point technique on Crusher's neck. The big man's eyes rolled back, and he dropped to his knees. 5 against 1, Cooper said, standing calmly in the middle of the fallen bikers. Like I said, not good odds, for you. He straightened his beer-soaked shirt and looked at each of the groaning men. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get up, walk out of this club, and never come back. And if I ever hear about you bothering Maria or anyone else in this establishment again, we'll have a much less pleasant conversation. The club was dead silent except for the music still playing overhead. Everyone stared in amazement at the scene before them. 5 notorious bikers laid out by one soldier in less than a minute. The bouncer had his phone out, mouth open in shock, having recorded the entire thing. Maria stepped out from behind the bar, her eyes wide with admiration and relief. That was amazing, she said softly. Cooper just nodded, his eyes still scanning the fallen bikers, making sure the threat was truly neutralized. The next few minutes in the Blue Moon nightclub felt surreal. The music had stopped, replaced by the murmur of excited voices and the clicking of phone cameras. The 5 bikers were slowly getting to their feet, their faces a mix of pain and embarrassment. Crusher, the once intimidating leader, could barely look up from the floor as he rubbed his neck where Cooper had pressed the pressure point. The police are on their way, the bouncer announced, still holding his phone. Got the whole thing on video. He looked at Cooper with newfound respect. That was some professional-level stuff, man. Cooper nodded but kept his attention on the bikers. His stance remained ready, though relaxed, prepared for any last desperate moves. But the fight had gone out of the steel serpents. The gray-bearded biker was nursing his twisted wrist, while the 2 skinny ones helped each other up, avoiding eye contact with anyone. My knife, the gray-bearded biker mumbled, looking at his weapon on the floor. Cooper's foot moved quickly, kicking the knife under the bar and out of reach. Evidence of assault with a deadly weapon, Cooper said calmly. You really want to claim that right now? The biker shook his head quickly and backed away. Maria was already behind the bar, getting ice packs ready. Her hands were steady now, her earlier fear replaced by a sense of security. She watched as Cooper maintained control of the situation with the same quiet authority he'd shown during the fight. Here's what happens next, Cooper announced, his voice carrying across the now quiet club. You're going to wait right here for the police. You're going to be respectful and cooperative. And tomorrow, you're going to seriously reconsider your life choices. He looked directly at Crusher. Starting with how you treat people in this establishment. The sound of police sirens grew louder outside. Through the club's windows, the flashing lights painted the scene in alternating red and blue. The bouncer had already moved to hold the door open as 2 police officers entered, hands on their holsters. Everyone stay where you are, the first officer commanded, taking in the scene. His partner began questioning witnesses while he approached Cooper. Sir, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Can you tell me what happened here? The policeman's eyes darted between Cooper and the defeated bikers. Cooper stood at ease, his military bearing evident as he gave a clear, concise report. These gentlemen entered the premises and began harassing staff and customers. When they became physically aggressive and produced a weapon, I was forced to defend myself and others using non-lethal combat techniques. The officer noticed Cooper's bearing and asked, Military. Staff Sergeant, Special Forces, currently on leave, sir. Cooper reached slowly into his back pocket and produced his military ID. More police officers arrived, along with a couple of paramedics who began checking the bikers for serious injuries. The skinny bikers were fine, just bruised egos. Crusher had a nasty bruise forming on his neck, and the gray-bearded biker's wrist needed to be examined. Maria stepped forward to give her statement, her voice strong and clear. These men have caused trouble here before. They threatened me, destroyed property, and tried to attack Sergeant Cooper when he defended me. She pointed to the broken beer bottles and overturned chairs as evidence. The club's owner arrived, having been called by the bouncer. Instead of being angry about the disruption, he was grinning from ear to ear. "Did you see the video?" he asked Officer Rodriguez excitedly. "This is going to be great publicity for the club. A real American hero taking down troublemakers." Cooper shook his head slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. He didn't feel like a hero. He had just done what needed to be done. As the police began taking formal statements and photographing the scene, Cooper noticed Maria watching him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. 2 hours later, the Blue Moon nightclub was almost back to normal. The police had finished taking statements, the paramedics had treated the minor injuries, and most of the customers had returned to their drinks and dancing. The Steel Serpents had been escorted out. Crusher and his crew were facing multiple charges, from assault to carrying concealed weapons. Cooper sat at the bar again, but this time in a fresh black t-shirt provided by the club's owner. His beer-soaked white shirt was sealed in an evidence bag, along with the knife and broken bottles. The bouncer had already uploaded the fight video to the club's social media, where it was quickly going viral. "You're trending on Twitter," Maria said with a smile, sliding a fresh cola across the bar to him. "People are calling you the soldier saint of 6th Street. She had finally finished giving her statement to the police and looked more relaxed than she had all evening. Cooper shook his head, embarrassed by the attention. "I didn't do anything special, just applied my training." He took a sip of his cola, wincing slightly. Despite his smooth movements during the fight, one of the bikers had managed to land a glancing blow to his ribs. Maria noticed his discomfort. "Let me get you some more ice for that," she said, but Cooper waved her off with a small smile. "Had worse in basic training," he assured her. "But thank you." The club owner, Mike Thompson, came over with a broad grin on his face. He was a short, energetic man in his 50s who had owned the Blue Moon for over 20 years. "Sergeant Cooper, you're a godsend. Those serpents have been causing trouble up and down the street for months. Nobody stood up to them until now." He pulled out a business card and handed it to Cooper. "I want to offer you a job, head of security. Name your price." His eyes sparkled with excitement. "Think about it. Who would dare cause trouble here with a Special Forces veteran in charge?" Cooper took the card politely, but didn't commit. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but I'm still active duty, just on leave for now." He tucked the card into his pocket anyway, noting how Maria seemed interested in this conversation. The night continued, and customers kept coming up to shake Cooper's hand or buy him drinks, which he politely declined, sticking to cola. Some wanted selfies with him, others just wanted to thank him for standing up to the bikers. A few veterans recognized his bearing and stopped to share quiet words of understanding. Around midnight, as the crowd began to thin, Maria took her break and sat next to Cooper at the bar. "You know," she said, stirring her iced tea, "I've worked here for 3 years. Seen all kinds of fights, all kinds of tough guys, but I've never seen anyone handle a situation like you did tonight." Cooper turned to look at her, noting the genuine interest in her eyes. "In Special Forces, they teach us that the best fight is the one you can avoid. When you can't avoid it, end it quickly and efficiently." He smiled slightly. "Though I admit, 5-to-1 odds weren't exactly what I had in mind for my quiet night out." Maria laughed, a warm sound that seemed to cut through the club's background noise. "Well, I'm glad you were here. Those guys had been getting worse every time they showed up. I was starting to think about quitting, honestly." "Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to bullies," Cooper said thoughtfully. "Shows them they're not as tough as they think they are." The club's lights dimmed slightly, signaling last call was approaching. Outside, the streets of Austin were still alive with the sound of music and laughter, but inside the Blue Moon, something had changed. The air felt lighter, as if a dark cloud that had been hanging over the place had finally lifted. The next week brought big changes to the Blue Moon nightclub and the surrounding area. The video of Cooper taking down the Steel Serpents had gone viral, reaching millions of views across social media. Local news stations picked up the story, praising the soldier who stood up to gang intimidation. But the real changes were happening on the streets. Cooper, who had initially planned to spend his leave quietly, found himself at the center of unexpected attention. The district attorney's office had called, asking him to testify against the Steel Serpents. It turned out that Crusher and his crew had been involved in similar incidents across 3 counties. Now, with video evidence and multiple witnesses, The authorities finally had a solid case against them. "You've started something bigger than you know," Officer Rodriguez told Cooper when they met to review the case. The police officer spread out several files on his desk. "Since that night, we've had dozens of business owners come forward with complaints about the serpents. People aren't afraid to speak up anymore." Cooper sat in the police station, looking through the reports. "They were just bullies," he said simply. "Bullies only have power when people are too scared to stand up to them." Back at the Blue Moon, business was booming. The club had become something of a local landmark, with people coming from all over Texas to see where the famous fight had happened. Mike Thompson, the owner, had even put up a framed screenshot from the video showing Cooper calmly standing among the fallen bikers. Maria had been busy too. After the incident, she'd approached Cooper with an unusual request. "I want you to teach me self-defense," she had said. "Not just me. A lot of the staff here want to learn. We're tired of feeling helpless." Cooper had thought about it for a day, then agreed. With the club owner's permission, they started using the empty space above the club in the mornings for training sessions. Cooper taught them the basics: stance, awareness, simple but effective moves to escape danger. He emphasized what he had learned in the military. The best defense was avoiding conflict altogether. "Watch their hands, not their faces," Cooper explained to the small group of club staff. "Hands tell you what someone's going to do before they do it." Maria picked up the techniques quickly, showing a natural talent for the defensive moves. The local news came to cover the training sessions, painting Cooper as a community hero who was now helping others protect themselves. But Cooper wasn't comfortable with the attention. He preferred the quiet moments, like when he was teaching Maria a proper defensive stance or sharing stories with the other veterans who now frequently visited the club. One evening, as Cooper sat at his usual spot at the bar, Maria brought him his cola without being asked. "You know," she said, leaning on the bar, "I used to hate coming to work. Always worried about who might cause trouble." She smiled. "Now it feels different, like we can handle whatever happens." Cooper nodded, understanding. He had seen the same transformation in soldiers during training, how confidence and skill could replace fear. "It's not about being tough," he said. "It's about being prepared and working together." The club's atmosphere had changed too. The bouncer had taken Cooper's lessons to heart, handling potential troublemakers with calm professionalism instead of aggression. Other clubs in the area had started sending their staff to Cooper's training sessions. Even some of the local police officers dropped by to share their own experiences and learn from his military expertise. As Cooper watched the busy club from his spot at the bar, he felt a sense of satisfaction. His quiet leave might have turned out differently than planned, but maybe this was exactly where he needed to be. The skills he learned in combat were now helping people in a different way, turning fear into confidence and a troubled bar into a safer place for everyone. 1 month after the incident, the Blue Moon Nightclub hosted a special event. The mayor of Austin had come to present Cooper with a Civilian Service Award, recognizing his role in making the entertainment district safer. The club was packed with familiar faces, staff members Cooper had trained, police officers he worked with, and regular customers who had witnessed the changes over the past month. Cooper stood uncomfortably in his dress uniform, the new award pinned next to his combat medals. He hadn't wanted the ceremony, but Maria had convinced him it was important for the community. "Sometimes people need heroes," she had told him, "even if the heroes don't think they are one." The Steel Serpents case had concluded earlier that week. Crusher and his crew had accepted a plea deal, facing jail time and agreeing to stay away from the entertainment district permanently. Their testimony had led to the arrest of higher-ranking gang members, effectively dismantling the organization's local chapter. "The thing about bullies," Cooper said in his short acceptance speech, "is that they lose their power when communities stand together." What happened that night wasn't about one soldier against 5 bikers. It was about saying no to intimidation and yes to protecting each other. After the ceremony, as the club returned to its normal evening operations, Cooper sat at his usual spot at the bar. His leave was ending soon. Duty called him back to his unit. But things would be different now. Mike Thompson had officially hired him as a security consultant, allowing him to continue training staff whenever he was in town. Maria brought him his usual cola, but this time she sat down beside him instead of returning to work. "So," she said, "I heard you're heading back next week. There was something in her voice that made Cooper turn to look at her directly. 10 more months of service, he replied. Then I'm done. Looking at retirement. He smiled slightly. Thinking about settling down somewhere. Maybe Texas. Maria's eyes lit up at this news. Over the past month, their relationship had grown beyond teacher and student. They had shared late-night conversations after closing, morning coffee before training sessions, and countless small moments in between. Cooper had found himself looking forward to seeing her each day, and she had started taking her breaks whenever he was at the bar. You know, Maria said, playing with her necklace nervously, I'm starting college next semester. Criminal justice major. Your training sessions made me realize I want to help people feel safer, maybe become a police officer. Cooper nodded approvingly. You'd be good at it. You have the right instincts, and you care about people. He paused, then added softly, I could help you study when I visit. The word visit hung in the air between them. Maria took a deep breath. Or maybe, when you're back for good? She met his eyes, and in that moment, both of them knew this wasn't just about self-defense training anymore. Before Cooper could respond, Mike Thompson called everyone's attention. The club owner stood on the small stage, microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 month ago, our club changed forever thanks to one brave soldier. Tonight, we're making it official. Every Thursday from now on is Military Appreciation Night at the Blue Moon. All service members drink free. The crowd cheered, and Cooper shook his head with a smile. The owner had been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right moment to announce it. As the music started playing again and the crowd returned to their conversations, Cooper turned back to Maria. You know what? He said, his voice warm. I think Texas sounds just about perfect. He reached over and took her hand, and Maria's smile lit up brighter than all the neon lights in the club. Sometimes the worst nights turned into the best beginnings. A soldier looking for a quiet drink had found a new purpose, a community had found its strength, and two people had found each other. The Blue Moon Nightclub would never be the same. It had become something better, something stronger, all because one man had stood up when it mattered most.